Mic check 1 2, testing 1 2.
Buenas and half a day, ladies and gentlemen. This informational hearing by the Committee on Guam U.S. Military Buildup, Infrastructure and Transportation is hereby convened. On the agenda is the informational briefing by members of the Navy team leading the efforts on the preparations of the supplemental analysis to the 2015 final Mariana Islands Training and Testing, the MITT, Environmental Impact Statement, Overseas Environmental Impact Statement, the EIS, and the OEIS. Just for the information of the public, in compliance with the Open Government Law, the initial notification of this informational hearing was disseminated on Friday, August 11th, with a follow-up second notice disseminated on the 16th of August, Wednesday. I would like to thank our media partners for assisting in notifying the community with regards to this informational hearing, and I also would like to thank Speaker Cruz as well as the senators in the Guam Legislature for allowing us to be able to proceed with this particular informational hearing in light of the ongoing budget discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is specifically the informational hearing was called specifically because the Department of the Navy is now preparing a supplement to the 2015 MITT, like was highlighted a little earlier, with an EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, and an Overseas Environmental Impact Statement. And with regards to that, public comments will be accepted through September 11, 2017, and comments must be postmarked or received online by September 11, 2017, Chamorro Standard Time, for consideration in the draft supplemental EIS and OEIS. We also, my office and my committee also has the appropriate address for the Navy Facilities Engineering Command Pacific. If anyone would like to have that information, it would be readily available through the committee or through members of this particular committee. I would like to also recognize the Speaker Cruz, for your presence this morning in this informational hearing, as well as Vice Speaker Talai. Thank you very much, my colleagues, for joining us this morning. The individuals that have signed up, and I'm going to recognize their names for having signed up, and then go ahead and yield to the individuals who have been invited up to the table to initiate the presentation. We do have Mr. Gary Partodo, who's from the Office of Senator Espaldon. We have Von Nam John from the U.S. Navy, John F. Salas from Joint Region Marianas, Julie Rivera from the Navy, David O'Doul from the Navy, Jenny Flores from Joint Region Marianas, JRM, and Mr. Roy Satsui from JRM also. So lady and gentlemen, welcome to the Guam Legislature, and thank you very much for participating in this informational hearing. I believe it's very important that the community of Guam, as well as the region, have an understanding as to any aspect of the military buildup, whether it's a supplemental assessment, an additional study, that they be given that information publicly and be able to provide comments if they wish to do so. So I thank you very much for participating in this informational hearing. Mr. Satsui, I believe that you are the head of the table. Did you want to identify yourself, identify who's on the panel, and then we can proceed with the presentation?
Thank you, Senator. Buenas and half a day, everyone. Thank you very much, Senators, for this opportunity. On behalf of Admiral Chatfield, I'm a special assistant to Admiral Chatfield, and we very much appreciate this opportunity to let our team be able to explain the initiative of the desire to do a supplement to the Mariana Island Training and Testing EIS. And our team will be explaining the purpose and asking for input on our scoping process to help shape the supplement. Accompanying me, also representing Admiral Chatfield, is our attorney, Commander David O'Dowd, and I'll let the rest of our team introduce themselves, and then we'll proceed right into the briefing.
Please proceed.
Good morning. John Salas, as you had mentioned.
Morning, John.
Good morning and half a day. John Van Aim from Pacific Fleet.
Half a day, John. Welcome.
Good morning. Julie Rivers from U.S. Pacific Fleet.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome. And who's going to commence with the presentation? Mr. Salas?
Yes.
Okay, you can begin.
Good morning, Senator Francois Aguon, Mr. Chairman. Also, good morning, Hafide Speaker, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Vice Speaker. Buenas and Hafide. Before I pass off the reins to the primary speaker, who is Mr. John Van Name, my colleague to my left, appreciate and thank your availability and giving us the opportunity for participating in this informational hearing. So for that, I appreciate it. So on August 1st, as you probably are aware, the notice of intent for the supplement to this EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, was published in the Federal Register. So because, there was, and John can probably speak to it a little bit more, there was a couple days delay for the actual publication. So the actual 45-day public scoping period really ends on September 15th by September 11th. So we still, as John would also reiterate, comments that we've received, and we have received comments from July 28th, will still be part of the 45-day scoping period. So officially, the scoping period ends on September 15th. And that's why, we've asked.
So for clarification, I just want to ensure that the local community is properly informed with regards to any extension. So has information been disseminated by yourselves and your representatives with regards to the extension of the timeline? Or not an extension of the timeline, but the change in the timeline?
Yeah, the Federal Register publication on the 1st of August explained that the 45-day period officially goes from the 1st to the 15th of September. We've been making a point during our stakeholder briefings to make sure folks knew that that had changed.
But
So
have you also shared that with our media partners in the community? And if you notice, what I'm trying to get at is ensuring that the community is part of the conversation and any discussion with regards to information received, with regards to public hearings, with regards to the change in timeline. So that's one question that I have. If, as a result, I understand about going into the registry and identifying that the timeline has changed, but has this information been properly extended to our media partners so that they can at least assist in the dissemination of any change in timelines?
Yeah, there was a press release that was provided to the media outlets. So the media should have known by that. And also, sir, we encourage everyone and hopes everyone can go to the website when they're able to. And we have a banner on that website that explains the new ending date for the scoping period.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Salas, you may continue.
Yes, so thanks, John. So within the scoping period of the 45-day, that's the main intent of why the team is here. We've got folks from Pacific Fleet, primarily in Hawaii, and Mr. John Van Name actually works out of DC or New York. He works remotely. So for the past week, they've been on Guam since Monday. We've had several meetings in the CNMI and on Guam. And the key message of why we're doing these meetings is to properly scope this impending analysis to try to get any questions or concerns that key stakeholders and key local leaders have, so that the team can come away with what these questions are or what these concerns, so that they can probably scope this environmental analysis for the supplement. So that's the whole intent of the meetings here. With that being said, I can pass off to John here, who can discuss more what the actual supplement MITT is about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salas.
Thank you, John. And again, thank you, gentlemen and lady, for the opportunity to, again, discuss our effort that's initiating now to supplement the 2015 Mariana Islands Training and Testing EIS. And that's why we're, happy to be here this week. And we were up in the CNMI on Wednesday and had a number of briefings with key stakeholders. So I don't know if the presentation is being broadcast on laptops on your tables or whatnot, but we'll start off with the slide that's titled "Bottom Line Up Front." And again, really want to make, right up front, say why we're here and what we're discussing. Okay, so next slide, please. There we go. This supplement to the 2015 Mariana Islands Training and Testing EIS is going to focus on military readiness activities conducted at sea and on the island of FDM. The 2015 document that we're updating the analysis to looked at the training areas in Naval Base Guam, Naval Magazine, and the land training areas in the CNMI on Tinian and Rota and Saipan. But this supplement's going to focus at sea, and we'll get to why that is. This supplement needs to support the reauthorization under the Marine Mammal Protection Act of a letter of authorization. The current MMPA, Marine Mammal Protection Act authorization, expires August 2020. When we first did the 2010 Mariana Islands Range Complex EIS, we received a letter of authorization that authorized at-sea activities from 2010 to 2015. The 2015 EIS, again, gave us authorization. By regulation, it cannot exceed a 5-year term, 2015 to 2020. This effort, the primary purpose of this effort being done now at this time, is to make sure we can do a good, thorough analysis, which takes time, to assist the fisheries service, support the fisheries service in issuing us another authorization. So we have a block of time from 2020 to 2025. Again, that authorization and the endangered species biological opinion for the at sea, for the marine resources, have 5-year terms. We also have a biological opinion for land-based endangered species, the Mariana megapode, the fruit bat. That biological opinion has no expiration date. So until and unless either a status of an endangered species changes or our land-based activities change in a substantive way, that biological opinion remains in effect. We've already updated it once, in fact, because there were the 23 new species that were listed a year or so ago on new plants and other animals, snails, and plants and insects. So that biological opinion, the 2015 analysis for those terrestrial activities remains valid and remains appropriate to continue the continuation of those activities. But to support the continuation of our at-sea activities, we're preparing this supplement. As John said, and the scoping period, we intended for the scoping period to begin officially on the 28th of July, and we sent out courtesy notifications letting folks know to be ready, keep an eye open. And we have to do that in advance of the actual Federal Register publishing. So we have to hope that that happens on the right date. They didn't get it done on that date due to a bureaucratic snafu up in DC. So it actually printed on the 1st. So in effect, it gave us a couple-day extension to the scoping period. We did get a few comments on the website after the 28th, but before the 1st, they're still good. We're going to consider those, and that's still part of the process, even though they're outside of the official scoping period. Scoping is important. I'll speak more about the public outreach and engagement we do, but at this early stage, we come to the public, we come to key stakeholders such as yourself to get information and hear from the community what's important to the community, what type of issues they may have or concerns they may have, so we can scope the scope of the analysis to make sure that we're considerate of those issues and concerns that the public and stakeholders may have. The scoping period also helps us to identify viable alternatives. Every environmental planning effort has to consider reasonable alternatives, and we're asking the public to give us any suggestions, any assistance they can in helping to scope out those alternatives. And again, we're requesting the scoping comments on www.mitt-eis.com. It's the website where anyone can find the 2015 document, all of the appendices and backup analysis. We try to make sure that the prime body of the document is readable to the general public, readable to the layman, but some of it, unavoidably, some of the analysis is very technically dense, and we have appendices that get into that technical detail, that detailed specialized biology and acoustic analysis, because there are folks and scientists that want to look at that, and that is available, but all of that is on the document. As we prepare information and output from our ongoing effort, which is beginning now to prepare the supplement, we'll be posting that to the website also. The website is an outstanding way for folks to get online, submit comments. It's right up front. You'll see a commenting feature for online. But we also accept comments the old-fashioned way. Write us a letter, put a stamp on it, have it postmarked by 15 September, and we'll receive and consider those comments. And also as a courtesy to folks who are in the audience and have come today, we have some comment forms that they could either take back, fill out, mail to us, or if they want to provide a comment today, we'll accept those comments that folks in the audience may want to give us today. Next slide, please. The agenda, I'll just go over this briefly because we're going to hit on every slide anyway, but we want to talk about the team that we have, the status of where we are with the 2015 document, the importance of realistic training, talk about our study area. Some folks may perceive that we're expanding our study area, expanding our footprint. This effort is for the status quo, to maintain the status quo level of training that we have with any adjustments due to the evolution of new systems like the littoral combat ship. But we're not proposing any new ranges, any new study areas. There are efforts underway right now, as you mentioned, the build-up here on Guam and the establishment of new live fire training ranges in the CNMI. Those are independent projects and efforts separate from this. This effort is strictly to support the ongoing, sustain the ability for the military to train as they're training today. So even if the buildup was never to happen, or was never proposed, and the CGMT never happened, we'd be here today doing this because we need that next block of authorization for the next 5 years, and we need to be sure that we can sustain our ability for the military to train as they are today and into the reasonably foreseeable future. We'll talk about why we're doing a supplement, the purpose and need, alternatives, cooperating agencies. We partner closely with the Fisheries Service, the public involvement, and a notional schedule of where we are. So next slide, please. The MITT team, obviously Julie, myself, we have other folks back in Honolulu who command a Pacific Fleet. We partner closely with Admiral Chatfield's staff. The first briefing we did when we hit Guam Monday morning was to go over to JRM and brief the Admiral as appropriate, let her know that we were coming out, reaching out, and briefing other entities, other key stakeholders throughout the week. But we have folks like John Solis and the local subject matter experts on the environment and this region. They're an important part of our team. They'll be assisting in the preparation of this supplemental analysis. In the 2015 document, the 2015 document was different from the 2010 MERC in that we better accounted for testing that could occur. There's not a great amount of testing that occurs in the Marianas. Most of it occurs back east in the Southern California Range Complex, where we're doing this very same process, a little bit ahead of this schedule because their authorization expires 2018 instead of 2020. So for the Southern California, for Hawaii, and then here in Marianas, we're all undergoing a similar process. We've better incorporated the testing that might occur. So our testing commands, system commands, NAVAIR and NAVC are involved as a proposed action. Office of Naval Research, which does more basic science, we're considering their activities. The Fisheries Service is an important part of the team because they're the subject matter experts on marine mammals. They're the Marine Mammal Protection Act, marine species under the Endangered Species Act, under their purview. We need their authorization, we need their consultation. Important part of the team, obviously, is stakeholders and the public. That's why we're here today, and that's why we'll continue to reach out through the process, because we need to hear from key stakeholders and the public what their concerns are at this point to help us shape that analysis that we're initiating now. And then once we have the draft document, to help us improve that draft when it comes out, to help make sure we have an improved final document at the end of the process. Other military services, I mentioned Southern California and Hawaii, and also on the East Coast and the Pacific Northwest and the Gulf of Alaska. We're doing the very same thing. We have environmental analysis to support authorizations and to support these ongoing training requirements into the future. Marianas is different, though. It's a much tighter community between the Department of Defense Services and the Coast Guard. So while the Southern California document only assesses Department of Navy training, here in the Marianas, we also look at the Coast Guard, we look at the Air Force, because in many times, like our helicopter wing out of Anderson, HSC-25, they will routinely train with the Coast Guard in search and rescue mission, because we have the airplanes, they have the cutters, And when they have to conduct those missions, they conduct those missions together. So this document is unique in the regard that it accounts for the training for all of the services, including the Coast Guard, which quite frankly provides a more robust and holistic analysis. So the Marianas is unique in that regard in this analysis. Next slide, please. And let me apologize briefly for my voice. I've been doing a lot of talking this week, a lot of speaking this week, and I'll make it through the day. The status of the 2015 document. Again, we signed a record of decision in 2015 for the Mariana Islands training and testing. The document we're now supplementing. And as a result of this, again, the outreach, the engagement is all important. Part of the outreach and engagement that occurred during that event, we heard from the public, in particular, let's say the fishing community here in Guam, the co-op, who we met with Monday evening. And they told us, you know, you all need to do a better job of communicating with us. Let us know when training is happening south of Guam off of Maritzo with the warning area 517, which is adjacent, close to the important fishing banks at Galvez Banks and Santa Rosa Banks. Thank you. So as a result of that, we, you know, with the Mariana Islands Range Complex Ops, MERC Ops, and folks at JRM, a constant dialogue with the fishermen to improve those lines of communication, to make sure that we can maximize public access to these fishing areas. We want to make sure that when it's available, it's known to be available and folks can fish there and recreate there. But also when there are hazardous military operations being conducted, that there's a good awareness that it is being used and we can maintain public safety, which is paramount. But again, that communication has been improving, has improved, will continue to improve because that dialogue is ongoing. But that's one of the benefits of this type of process where we reach out and we come out to the community. For the 2015 document, we're fully complying with our Marine Mammal Protection Act, Endangered Species Act obligations. When you go to our website, look at the 2015 document, Chapter 5 is on mitigations. And we have a suite of time-tested routine mitigations that we employ everywhere. Everywhere the Navy does an event, we employ these procedural mitigations, which, for instance, if a destroyer is doing active sonar to train and remain proficient in pursuing and detecting these ultra-quiet diesel-electric submarines, there's also trained lookouts on board during that time those events are happening. And if these trained lookouts spot marine mammals or sea turtles within a certain zone, they'll power down the sonar. If the animal is seen closer in, yet they'll power down further. And at a certain point, 200 yards, they will shut down the sonar. So even though that interrupts the continuity of the training event, we do that because we, again, want to protect the species. We don't want any injuries to occur, and we make sure that we do those mitigations everywhere we train. We do have some unique mitigations that are specific to the environment here in the Marianas. So when EOD Mobile Unit 5 is honing their skills to perform underwater detonations, which they need to do not only in times of conflict to keep harbors and sea lanes free of naval mines, they also respond to underwater UXO, and they're our first line defense when unexploded ordnance is found during a construction site or anything like that. But they do that at Apra Harbor, outer Apra Harbor. They perform these underwater detonation trainings. And so before they'll set the charge, but before they set the charge off, they survey for marine mammals, they survey for turtles, but they also survey for hammerhead sharks because the scalloped hammerhead shark is endangered. It's been decimated by the shark finning, the illegal shark finning operations. So we make sure that if they see a hammerhead, can't tell a scalloped hammerhead from another hammerhead, but even a guy like myself from New York knows a hammerhead shark when he sees one. If there's a hammerhead shark in the region, they stand down and hold fire till it's seen to leave. So while that mitigation for mammals and turtles is similar to everywhere else that we do that type of event off of Southern California, off of Virginia Beach and Norfolk on the East Coast, and in Hawaii off of Honolulu, they also have to be respectful of the local species. We have the hammerhead shark is also mitigated for. Our part of our obligations is annual reporting, and I think I'll turn over for this little piece to Julie because this is her subject matter expertise. If you want to speak a little bit about the reports and the surveys that we do, you can do a much better job than I ever could hope to.
Thanks, John. So, as John mentioned, under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act, we have a requirement to do marine species monitoring and provide annual reports to National Marine Fisheries Service. And so we developed this website that has all of the marine species monitoring reports from all the range complexes, including the Mariana Islands, available to the public. So the link is here in the brief. It's www.navymarineспeciesmonitoring.us. All of the, like I said, all of the annual reports are there. And then when there's enough data to generate a publication, the publications are also provided on that website. So here, specifically in the Mariana Islands, we did a 2007 large-scale 4-month longline transect survey to get baseline marine mammal distribution to derive our density estimates. And then starting in 2010, we started annual marine mammal, well, we were doing them twice a year here, marine mammal surveys from a small boat. We're doing them once a year now, and then sea turtle tagging surveys as well. And that's in cooperation with not only National Marine Fisheries Service, but local regulatory agencies. And then we also we had done coral surveys around Farallon de Mendonia between 99 and 2012, and now we're doing them every 5 years, and we have another one of those coming up this September.
Sorry, thank you, Julie.
I did burn CDs for you if it's easier to get the marine species monitoring and the terrestrial monitoring reports here as well. So I can give these to you now or after, but we thought it might just be easier than trying to get through the website and find them.
Thank you, Ms. Julie.
Thank you, Julie. And again, it's good work that Julie and her folks do to get some of the science that previously was not done here in the Marianas, such as the line transects and the marine mammal surveys. And again, thank you for those discs. And anything else in that regard, if we could assist,
Just a
let
quick
us know.
question, Julie, if I may. You said your next FDM coral survey is going to be conducted in September, which is just next month?
Correct.
Right after you're done with your survey, how soon before the report is readily available in the internet?
I believe it's due to us for our annual report. We provide our annual report to National Marine Fisheries Service in April, and so we're expecting to have the report as part of that package that goes to National Marine Fisheries Service. And the way that it's arranged in our compliance documents is National Marine Fisheries Service has 3 months to review the document and provide comments, and then once they provide us with the go-ahead, it's available to the public. So that would be it would be available on the public side of the website next summer.
Next summer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. National Historic Preservation Act, we have a programmatic agreement for training that was signed in 2009 and identifies no training areas to be respectful of the cultural resources and historic artifacts. And there's also reporting and consultation requirements when training events need to occur, let's say on the leased area in Tinian. So we comply with that also. But again, these are obligatory things, right, that the law says we need to do, that our permits obligate us to, but the Navy takes great pride. I've been working in the Navy environmental program since 1990. So I can really tell with great sincerity that we take great pride in our environmental stewardship programs, improving all the time, better than it ever was before. And to be good stewards, you need to do more than you're just supposed to do. You need to go above and beyond those obligations. So I'll let John speak to a little bit about what JRM is doing here locally to be good stewards of our Guam environment.
Yes, so the region here, in conjunction with all the installations, we take pride in our environmental stewardship efforts. And some of the things that we do is green sea turtle surveys at the beaches at Naval Base Guam as well as Anderson. And those we particularly take pride in because we also get cooperative agreement with the University of Guam to get their graduate students to participate in these surveys along with DoD Navy biologists. So we do that. We've also got work to do invasive species surveys, looking at invasive flora and fauna, so that we could be prepared to handle these, the influx of invasive species that are problematic for our island. I guess one of the examples that I have brought up in other meetings with other stakeholders in terms of how the MITT, the training that DoD proposes and are currently doing, and how it also benefits the environment as well as benefits the community. Back in June of this year, 2017, we had the Navy Mobile Dive Salvage Unit number 1. So they were here, and these are Navy salvage divers that basically they get activated to, do salvage dive operations at sunken vessels or do help with recovery operations. So they came out here and they reached to Department of Agriculture, the Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources, as well as Guam EPA, and said, hey, we're coming to Guam, we want to do some training. Is there anything that we can look at? So with the assistance of Guam EPA and as well as the local NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Services Office here, we identified 4 targets. And when I say targets, I'm talking about sunken derelict boats or vessels. So we basically were able to recover and float a vessel in Pago Bay, as well as a couple of vessels, sunken vessels off the shore of Commercial Port, the Port Authority of Guam. So with that, we also interacted with the port employees there. And then, interesting enough, we also helped the Mauricio Mayor. We recovered and floated up a sunken vehicle off of Mauricio Pier. So that's an example of where we had Navy warfighters or operators that are training, but at the same time using the training opportunity to the benefit of the community as well as in the benefit of the environment. And not long after that training event in June, unfortunately, the U.S. Fitzgerald had an accident where a merchant flag vessel from the Philippines off the coast of Japan, they collided. So unfortunately, we lost 2 sailors there. But immediately after that dive operations or training here on Guam, they were deployed to assist with the recovery efforts in the coast of Japan. So that's just one example of how we could correlate training that we do here to also benefit the community and the environment.
Thank you, John. And that's a very good segue to the next slide, importance of realistic training and testing. The mission of the military is to provide the forces needed to deter war, protect the security of the United States, territories, interests, and citizens. To that end, the military services must man, maintain, train, equip forces capable of winning the wars, deterring aggression, maintaining freedom. So clearly the military needs to be trained to conduct traditional military operations, to deter folks from doing bad things to us, or to respond to and win in these regional conflicts that may flare up, or large-scale conflicts. But also importantly, the military is important for the homeland defense, keeping us safe here in our homes, for maritime security of the high seas, for commerce and safety, anti-piracy operations. 10 years ago, who'd have thought the Navy would be again fighting pirates like we were when the Barbary pirates were in force in the 1880s? But we have piracy as a mission now. But also importantly, as John mentioned, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, that training that the Mudsu divers got to recover sunken vessels, cars that fell off bridges or piers, or, God forbid, remains of people that may be lost at sea or lost in accidents or lost in disasters. And again, I mentioned I've actually been working for the Navy for 30 years, doing environmental since 1990. I never served, but I've been working for the service for almost 30 years now. And I know I personally take great pride when something happens, like the devastating earthquake that impacted the Haiti, Port-au-Prince, the port of Port-au-Prince. When the port's facilities were wiped out due to the earthquake, the very first people on the site to help restore those pier facilities, help build some temporary piers, bring water, bring relief, bring aid, was our Navy and Marines in the amphibious vessels, and the capability that we have. When the Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf, again, first on the spot was our Navy to provide aid and comfort. And even locally, when the typhoon impacted Saipan, there was fortunately an amphibious readiness group in the area to conduct training, and they immediately turned around and was able to provide aid. So that's one of the things where, you know, again, it's more than just the traditional warfighting capability, but also the Navy forces are there when we need them. And having this training for them to be able to train to that mission and train to those requirements now, so when they're operating under duress or under severe conditions due to a disaster, they can do so safely and effectively and with good time. Next slide, please. The study area. The study area is what it was in the 2010 document, and we've had a similar approach in Southern California along the eastern seaboard and Hawaii, that we focused on the range complexes. And so the 2010 Mariana Islands Range Complex really looked at that red dotted rectangle with the corner cut out. That's the MERC, Mariana Islands Range Complex, which has special use airspace, has the land-based components here on Guam and the CNMI, and other areas like our underwater detonation training area in Outer Apra Harbor, off of PD and off of Agate. For the 2015 document, we broadened the aperture, expanded the scope of where we analyzed. We didn't make the range bigger. It's been characterized as an expansion of the range, but basically what we did is we broadened the aperture and what we looked at for analysis. So when ships are transiting along that dotted line from Hawaii to the Marianas, as we've done between Southern California and Hawaii, as they transit along, as you might imagine, they're underway for some number of days. They still conduct some training events while they're underway. We've included those events now in our analysis. To the west and to the north, we included sea space, again, where ships and forces and strike groups will transit back and forth from the Philippine EEZ here to the Marianas. So we've picked up that sea space, so those events that are occurring and do occur in those areas are now covered under our authorization and are in our analysis. So again, by expanding the scope, the area that we covered, it's a more holistic analysis, and we have MMPA, Marine Mammal Protection Act authorization, ESA coverage for those activities. This supplement is not proposing any changes, any increase in area, any new ranges, no new capabilities, no new facilities, no new land-based training. So the study area remains as it was in 2015. The analysis, again, as we mentioned, are going to be focused on those at-sea activities to support that Marine Mammal Protection Act authorization. Next slide, please. And again, one more kind of background slide. Why is this area important to the military? And it pretty much historically always has been. The MITT study area, the Mariana Island Range Complex, has been used for training military readiness activities for decades. The Navy's been here for a long time, and we hope to be here for a long time to come. And this supplement supports that training that's going to go on past August of 2020. I'm involved with all of our range complex in Southern California, Hawaii, and one of the things that makes this place special is it has a good variety of those types of capabilities, those types of areas and resources that provide that environment that sailors can get that kind of high-grade, high-level training in. For realistic and challenging anti-submarine warfare, we need to be able to train where there's specific bathymetry, the seabed bottom. So when we have, you know, steep declines in depth and complex geography down on the seabed, those are the areas where high-end anti-submarine warfare occurs and needs to occur, because that's where the fight's going to be, where the adversary submarines can hide and lurk behind seamounts or within undersea canyons. We've got those kind of attributes are here. We have a lot of sea space and airspace that is available. The FAA recently created new warning areas along, so where previously we just had warning area 517, that is just south of Mauricio, south of Guam. Now we have additional warning areas that have been established that provide that enduring area where the forces can also train, as opposed to just going to Whiskey 517 most of the time. So we have good, generous amounts of airspace. We have a lot of sea space. there's not too much in the way of there are areas where there's very little commercial traffic, either air or sea, that so allows us to train safely. We've got the land-based ranges here on Guam, Rota, Saipan, Tinian, and FDM. They can support all the military mission areas here, from anti-submarine to missile defense to EOD Mobile Unit 5 training, to make sure that they can demine a harbor if a harbor gets mined, or be responsive to unexploded ordnance that turns up. This is also an important area for training of deployed forces. If you might imagine, most of the ships, the fleet concentration area is Southern California, San Diego. So the ships that are home based there in San Diego, and even up in the Pacific Northwest, they get all of their training to get ready for deployment, to certified for deployment there in Southern California. So they're training constantly for maybe 6 months before they deploy, but now they do deploy. They head to Hawaii, get additional training in Hawaii, and then head here to the Marianas as they're deploying west to points west, South China Sea, Sea of Japan, for instance. And this is their last opportunity in the United States to get that training they need here with the forces, with the support of Apra Harbor and Andersen Air Force Base. So because it's the last opportunity in the U.S. to train, it's an important asset also before they actually deploy to the potential areas of the fight. We're able to conduct joint and combined force operations here, as we do in Hawaii, Rim of Pacific. We've got 50 nations that participate every 2 years. They also here in the Marianas, they will partner with Japanese Defense Forces, New Zealand, Australians, our allies, to make sure that as we are operating and keeping the waters west of here safe and secure, that they're able to interoperate together and understand enough to work well together in the real situation. So we have that joint training here also. And again, it's the last opportunity for rehearsal of any contingencies, any real world events that may be popping up west of here. The Marianas is the last opportunity to hone those skills before they're really, no kidding, in deployment. Next slide, please. Slide 9. Why are we supplementing the 2015 EIS? So finally we get to the point of the matter, why are we preparing the supplement? And again, at sea, we know the science and even the acoustic criteria that we use to gauge. NIMS provides acoustic criteria to help us gauge what those predicted impacts might be, what an acoustic exposure to a humpback whale, at what level of exposure will there be a behavioral response? Will the whale notice and maybe behave in some fashion? Those criteria are the benchmarks that we gauge against. They've been updated. So this supplement will revise that analysis that was done in 2015 with the new updated criteria. We're also going to update our density of information, like the occurrence and abundance of the certain species. That's thankfully, thanks to Julie's good work, we have more information there. We're going to consider that. We're also going to consider new science. Science doesn't stop in 2015. Even though we published the document, there are still studies, a steady stream of studies and research, and even our own observations during our monitoring that's now available, and we're going to pull that into the analysis so we can consider all of that. That information's, and these are Center for Environmental Quality words in the furtherance of the National Environmental Policy Act. So the supplement is in accordance with the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. The supplement to a document is how they tell us we do these updates. And we're following all the rules that are required with that, with the exception of we're also doing scoping. Typically, they say scoping is not required, but we thought it was important to come out here and reach out to the community in any sense. So that's why we're here this week. This new information is, because we're already ahead of schedule in Southern California, Hawaii, because their permit expires in 2018, so we're a little further along in the analysis. Our anticipation is that even though we're using new criteria, new densities, we anticipate that the conclusions reached in 2015 are going to found to still be valid. We'll know for certain, proof is in the pudding. Once we actually conduct that analysis and we see the results, we'll know for sure, but right now our anticipation is that the conclusion is going to remain similar, the same, and remain valid. Also, the changes in activities, because I mentioned military readiness requirements evolve over time. And some of the equipment and gear and systems that our sailors and airmen use evolve over time. A perfect example would be the Littoral Combat Ship. Is being introduced to the fleet. It's introduced to the fleet. We're going to have it come here to the Marianas to train. Also, on its way points west, the warfare package areas, mission package areas that the LCS, Littoral Combat Ship, may carry, have some modified sensors, modified equipment, similar to what we've always been doing, but different. And this analysis will account for things such as that. Another good example of something that's now being made available to the fleet, or will soon be, is for non-lethal deterrence. As you might imagine, recall the Cole disaster, where the destroyer Cole was approached by a local boat that was packed with explosives, and we lost a number of sailors. We constantly, obviously, the Navy, the vessels have weapons, and they can and would be used if necessary, but we're also trying to use non-lethal deterrence. And the Navy's actually developing a laser device which could actually point out and target the outboard motor, let's say. And they've been testing that right now back along the west coast off the Point Magoo Sea Range, where we would use a laser to disable the boat, the potential threat boat that's approaching. So non-lethal deterrences like that, you'll see our document, we talk about lasers. That's the kind of thing we have that's coming to the fleet over time. And even though we're going to have these identified evolutionary changes to our requirements, not revolutionary, but evolutionary over time, as it's always happened, we don't expect any of those to be substantive changes. Again, in Hawaii, Southern California, the East Coast, things have changed, more of certain activities, less of other activities, but none of it was found to be substantive there. And again, I expect it'll be the same here once we get everything validated. But again, final bottom line is why we're doing this supplement is we need another 5-year block of time so we can keep training as we've been training for the past few decades. Next slide, please. Purpose of the supplement, and again, this is a little repetitive, so I'll go through it quickly, but the National Environmental Policy Act, Executive Order 12114, which speaks to environmental effects abroad for major federal actions. That's why it's an EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, overseas Environmental Impact Statement, EIS, OEIS, because we comply with the NEPA, which is for the U.S. and U.S. waters, and the Executive Order, which is for those spaces that are open seas, that are not U.S. waters. So this supplement to that 2015 document is going to, again, address those training and testing activities with new weapons, new systems that may come to the fleet after 2020, adjustments to those types of activities that are necessary to meet evolving mission requirements, because the world threat, the situation is constantly evolving and changing, and our Navy needs to evolve with it. We're going to support National Marine Fisheries Service in issuing a letter of authorization under the MMPA in August of 2020, and we're going to support the consultation with the Fisheries Service for the Endangered Species Act consultation for species under their cognizance, like humpback whales, like scalloped hammerhead sharks, like the handful of endangered corals. And if necessary, we'll reconsult with the Fish and Wildlife Service for terrestrial species. But again, we don't know if that's going to be necessary because we're not proposing any changes to our land-based activities. And as of this time, there's no change that we are aware of coming in regards to the status or introduction of new species, like we had the 23 plants and insects introduced back a year or so ago. So unless that changes, the status quo of that consultation is still good to go. Next slide, please. Proposed action. Our proposed action under this supplement is basically to continue those operations that we proposed under the 2015 document. So it's going to be to conduct those military readiness activities here in the Marianas, in the waters surrounding the Marianas, and within Apra Harbor, as well as those additional sea spaces to the west that we've seen, to the Philippine EEZ, to the north to the Japanese EEZ, as well as that transit corridor. And again, that study area is the same as it was in 2015. And our proposed action is still the same. We propose to continue those military readiness activities necessary to ensure fleet readiness. We're going to look at, to achieve that, we're going to look at, again, those requirements beyond 2020 into the reasonably foreseeable future. We're going to look to accommodate evolving mission changes and introduction of new vessels, aircraft systems like the Littoral Combat Ship and its mission modules that may come with the LCS. But again, the activities that we're looking at, as in 2015 when compared to 2010, this supplement, the activities that we're going to analyze are similar to those activities that we've conducted here in the Marianas for decades, and they're going to be generally consistent with what's now in that 2015 document. Next slide, please. Purpose and need. And purpose of the proposed action to continue military training here is to maintain military readiness, meet the requirements of Title X, ensure the military can meet their mission to deter war, protect the security of the United States, its territories, its interests, and its citizens. So that's the purpose of this, of this action, this ongoing action. Next slide, please. Alternatives. Every environmental impact statement, environmental assessment, every environmental effort has to handle a couple of alternatives. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to power through it, sir. I'm good. Every environmental impact statement, environmental assessment has to consider a handful of alternatives. We've all seen it before in every other document. Our 2015 document had alternatives. We all have a no action alternative, and Center for Environmental Quality allows us to define no action two ways. For an ongoing action, such as this, in 2015, we said the no action is status quo. No change to those activities, to go on with those very same activities that were identified in the 2010 document. A no action could also be to not do something. So let's say we were doing an environmental assessment for building a new road, building a new facility where one doesn't exist. The no action would be, what if I don't build that road, build that facility? So we had a no action of the status quo in 2015. And then we had two reasonable alternatives to meet the purpose and need. And they were, by the time the record of decision was signed. Pardon me one moment. Our supplement's going to right now consider at least two alternatives. We know we're going to have a no action. The no action that was considered for the Hawaii Southern California document or for the Atlantic Fleet document was actually a no action of NIMS not issuing a permit and then the Navy not conducting those activities that relied on the permit. So we did hear many people commented, criticized that we didn't have a no action, that didn't consider no action because we always went with the status quo. We're still formulating that, but we will have a no action alternative here. We're deciding which kind of no action it's going to be, status quo or no permit, no training. And we will have an action alternative of revising those activities as necessary to meet the readiness requirements. We know we need to do that. Any additional alternatives, we're waiting for scoping. We're waiting to hear what the public may recommend, what key stakeholders may recommend. That's the purpose of scoping, help inform our suite of reasonable alternatives. So additional alternatives will be formulated once the scoping period closes and we see where we're going, as well as the no action, what type of no action being nailed down. It'll happen at that time. Any comments? I'll just press on.
Just a quick question with regards to that particular component. I noticed that in 2015, the final EIS, and OEIS, you just mentioned and highlighted that the status was status quo, no action. But the area of study was expanded tremendously in 2015. Can you explain? I'm trying to reconcile that thought. No action, but then our area of study is almost doubled.
Right. Under the no action alternative in the 2015 document, the no action was to only have the MIRC, only continue with that area of the MIRC, and those activities that were considered in the 2010 document. And our proposed action was to change those activities to consider testing that was going on, to better consider the testing that goes on concurrent with training, and then to expand our study area. Yeah, we didn't expand the area where training occurs, but we expanded the area that we look at in our study, like the transit lane. They've been transiting every time, constantly, but now we consider that in our analysis. So the proposed action was to expand our study area and modify those activities, and the record of decision picked alternative 1.
Thank you, John.
Okay, next slide, cooperating agencies. And I've just got a couple more slides to go. Our cooperating agency is going to be National Marine Fisheries Service. The Center for Environmental Quality, National Environmental Policy Act regulations allow us, when appropriate, to partner to have cooperating federal agencies when they have specific expertise, when they have a regulatory function that they need to perform. So NIMS, the Fisheries Service, has been our cooperating agency in the MIRC, in the MITT 2015, and in this one we're going to request they become a cooperating agency again. They've been a cooperating agency in every other project like this that we've done in Southern California, Hawaii, Pacific Northwest, Gulf of Alaska, along the eastern seaboard. And it's appropriate because, one, this environmental planning document, this NEPA, becomes their NEPA. They have a federal action, which is issuing a letter of authorization. This environmental planning supports that action by that agency. It supports our ongoing training, but it's also NEPA for their getting to a final rule. They likewise have their own process with the final rule where they'll have a proposed rule. They'll also accept comments on their proposed rule when it becomes issued, so the public has multiple opportunities to comment on all of this with our process and their process. But this NEPA becomes their NEPA. So they're a cooperating agency. In that regard, they're also a cooperating agency because they're the regulatory experts on marine mammals. They're the regulatory experts on endangered species under their cognizance, like the scalloped hammerhead shark, like the corals, like humpback whales, which get protected both ways, as a marine mammal and as an endangered marine mammal. So they'll be our cooperating agency. We're going to request it. We anticipate they'll say yes, as they always do, and they'll help make sure that our document is as good as it can be. Next slide, please. Public involvement. Again, I said it earlier, and I'll say it again, is that this is important. This allows us to hear from the local citizens, from the local communities, from the local governmental officials and key stakeholders such as yourself. What are those issues and concerns? Because we need to be sure that our decision maker, the decisions made at the Secretary of the Navy level, he or she signs that record of decision, but we need to be sure that to make that decision that they're cognizant and we also consider public input. The public participates three specific places during this process. Here in scoping, as we're doing now, and again, they help identify the scope of that analysis. When the draft document comes out, the public will get a chance to review the document and provide comment on the document. As we did in 2015, we will hold public meetings where the public will be invited to come to a discussion, post a session, speak to subject matter experts such as Julie about the biology, about the proposed activities, about our sustainability efforts. And we'll take comments during that period. And then once that's done, then based on the comments and based on public review of our draft document, we then polish, I guess would be the best term, is the final document. So the final document now is responsive to those comments, also picks up any additional science that may have popped up along the way, any new requirements for our analysis, but the final EIS will come out after the public review, being responsive to those public comments. And once that's published, we're mandated by the Center for Environmental Quality Act of a wait period. You know, it would be inappropriate, let's say, for decision maker hears the final EIS and signs it that day. You need 30 days to contemplate the analysis and sit on the analysis and think about the analysis. There's a 30-day wait period. You can't sign it the day you get a document. You have to wait and contemplate that document, contemplate the decision. During that period of time, we still receive comments, as we did in 2015. So when you look at the final EIS, and then you look at the record of decision, which is available at the www.mitt-eis.com website, the record of decision, there's even additional information and additional concerns that were raised post-final that we addressed in the record of decision. So that's three good areas where the public gets to participate in the process, and we welcome that participation. And again, thank you all for the opportunity today to continue with that. Final slide. Schedule, next slide. Published notice of intent in the Federal Register 1 August. Again, we provide courtesy notifications to key stakeholders that it was going to happen on the 28th. To get it here by the 28th, we mailed it before the 28th. The 28th came and it wasn't published. It's actually published on the 1st, so that actually extended the scoping period from 45 days to 45 plus days through September 15th. The draft EIS, I'm not going to give you a specific close-in date because I would only have to change it later, and I don't want to do that, but in a broad sense, we're anticipating we'll be able to release the draft supplemental late 2018, late fall, early winter of 2018. Our goal, again, is to try to get ahead of the holidays, to avoid all that. I've had to read too many of these things over the holidays, and we don't want anyone to do that. So we're hoping late fall, early winter to have the draft document out for a public review. We'll have our public meetings during that same time period, again, coming back here to Guam, going to the CNMI with open door sessions where the public can come in and ask more about, learn more about it, or provide comment and information to us at that time also. Once we get those comments and feedback from the public and the regulators, sometimes even EPA weighs in, they do weigh in, it's part of their responsibility. We'll provide and release a final supplemental that is responsive to that input we received during the draft process, the draft review. We'll wait 30 days, at least 30 days after that final is published, and we'll sign a record of decision. And again, we're anticipating that's going to be late, that all is going to happen late spring, early summer, because the one date certain, the one date I can tell you with great confidence is August 3rd, 2020. We and NIMS, the Fisheries Service, has to complete this process by August 3rd, 2020. Otherwise, we'll have a lapse in our authorization to use sonar explosives, conduct many activities at sea that are absolutely critical to ensure the readiness of our arms, of our sailors and airmen and armed services. So that's the date certain, August 3rd, 2020. We're striving mightily to have everything done by then. And that's my final slide. So if there are any additional comments, questions, we'd be happy to entertain them, and I'll reach out to my subject matter experts sitting to my left and right when the hard questions come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Von Naum. I don't know if there's going to be any direct hard questions, but I will open up the line of questions to my colleagues very shortly. Mrs. Tsutsui, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to allow our people to receive this presentation here at the public hearing room. I think it's very important that there's an acknowledgement of exactly what is going on, what the plans are, what additional studies are being conducted as it applies to the impending military buildup. And one thing I want to stress again to the public is the scoping period. The final date for receipt of any comments from the community would be the 15th of September at this initial scoping period, and then you've been provided all of the respective timelines in terms of the draft supplemental EIS, OEIS, late 2018. The public meetings will be conducted around that time frame, and then in mid-2020, the final supplemental EIS, OEIS will be presented to the public with a record of decision sometime in mid-2020 prior to August 3rd of that particular year. Just a couple of questions and comments. First of all, thank you very much for meeting with our fishermen and women out there. I think that that's an excellent start in regards to your initial scoping, because this study relates directly to the nature of their activities, and to involve them in the entire process and giving them that opportunity to be able to understand what the study and the scoping is going to entail, and then allowing them to be able to provide direct responses during the timeframes that have been identified, I think is a good start in terms of ensuring that the direct stakeholders, in addition to the community of Guam, are exposed to some of these activities. The one question I have, with the advent of new weapons and systems, I know that a statement was made that there will not be any change in the study area. So I'm looking at and trying to consolidate the two trains of thought, with the increased weaponry, the systems that are readily available out there, and then the scoping and the areas of study, and you feel very strongly that in fact that's the case.
Yeah, the area of study and the water space, sea space, airspace, land space that's used currently and was identified in the 2015 document, we're not going to need to change. We're not proposing to change any of that. Even though, because the military gets new ships, the DDG-1000 is being introduced to the fleet, Littoral Combat Ship is being introduced to the fleet. This analysis will consider any of the new capabilities those platforms, those ships may bring. But again, the footprint of the analysis is not going to change. We're not changing anything in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much for reaffirming that particular statement and that position. Mr. Speaker?
Sure.
Vice Speaker Talai?
Thank you. I had a couple questions. When you talked about on page 12 the no action as an alternative that would be proposed, so no action in this case is going to mean continuing the current MITT scope or size or study area and activities, right?
We're still waiting to get through scoping to officially and formally decide which type of no action we're going to have. So we want to hear from the public, because in the past we've always heard, we've been criticized because we didn't have a no training, no action alternative.
No activity option.
Right, and no activity that relies on that permit that NIMS will not provide us under their no action. For the Atlantic EIS, which was recently released for public review, they're in their public review period, that was the type of no action that was considered for that document. So that's on the table for us to consider it, but until it's premature and inappropriate for us to say what our alternatives are. You know, we're here to get your input to decide to help us inform alternatives, but oh, by the way, here's what alternatives are, right? So we're waiting, we really are waiting to make those final decisions till the scoping period's done, because we want to hear what people say in the way of what type of no action they feel is appropriate for us to put into our analysis, and what additional action alternatives that we may need to consider.
Right.
But again,
for example, limiting the scope of the area, or the frequency or things like that could also be alternatives. Is that correct?
Yeah, and even in the past document, when we look at the 2015 document, we've considered alternatives such as that, like to cease training or to train somewhere else or to train less than is required. But many times they don't meet the purpose and need. In the Environmental Policy Act, we really need to look at alternatives that are reasonable, and an alternative that would not allow the Navy to meet its mission requirements, to train to those requirements, would be considered not a reasonable alternative to not train, let's say. So we certainly look forward to the public giving us those comments like that, and they have in the past, and they will be addressed in the document, either as alternatives carried forward for analysis, as we did in 2015, and or alternatives that are considered but not carried forward because they weren't reasonable alternatives, they didn't meet our purpose and need. Like, just for another example, one that you'll see in the 2015 document is to have all training done synthetically. Let us sailors and airmen sit in front of a computer screen with 3D goggles or whatnot and train in a synthetic environment. And while they do rely on synthetic training for those early stages of training, it's not realistic. They would not be prepared if that's all they relied on. So that's an alternative that we considered and we identify in the EIS, but it's not carried forward because it's not an alternative that could reasonably be considered for a decision.
For the decision, this decision will be made by the Navy. So could you just remind us, for the MIRC, how long was the period of how long did the record of decision authorize that MIRC? Is that forever? Or
the record of, yeah, the NEPA, the Environmental Policy Analysis, the record of decision is not limiting in a time sense.
All right. So that's the same for the MIRC, the MITT?
That was the same for the MIRC and the MITT.
Right.
We made sure that in the 2015 document, that the analysis, and this is what the Center for Environmental Quality regulations tell us we need to do, is that the analysis is good until it's not. And when it's not good is when either there's a substantive change in your proposed action, and now that analysis we're relying on is no longer valid, or if there's a substantive change in the science, if new science on animal status changes, we have to go back and supplement.
So these permits, so we're doing the supplemental then not because you need an additional authorization, you need the permit to be renewed for 5 more years. That's what you're seeking, 5 more years beyond 2020. Yeah, because I was wondering why we're doing a supplemental, not a new EIS, like starting a new action, but it's yours. Okay, so you're just going to say this action gets to continue as long as forever with permits.
Continuing on and with authorization in 5-year blocks, even though the 2015 MITT, and back when we were here briefing and telling people, we were saying it's really the MIRC, the 2010 MIRC going on, it was appropriate to do a full up EIS for that, even though nothing land-based was proposed different, no changes, no substantive changes from 2010 to how we train on land. We expanded, broadened the scope, the aperture of the analysis to include these new areas that previously we didn't analyze.
Yes, it was doubled.
Which was good. Which was good. Gives us a better analysis. We also better incorporated the testing activities that occur in the Marianas as well as our other study areas. Previously, we focused just on training, and now we include in that same analysis testing. And while the level of testing in Southern California, let's say, is a lot because that's where the laboratories are and that's where testing commands are. There's still some testing that may happen here during events or may happen while they're conducting training, concurrent with training, testing that new software, let's say, that's in a system.
All right. I was looking through the reports, and so we see the reports that are required by the permits, but no other, well, I didn't see any other reports that kind of reports, maybe these weren't required in the ROD, reports on the effects on fishermen. But we do see the reports regarding they are tagging turtles, so they're trying to get the location. They put GPS, they pull them up in the boat, measure them, take a skin sample, put a GPS monitoring device on them. And so for example, with the turtles, the findings seem still a little vague. I know that's just begun in 2015. It says, the question was, what is the occurrence and or habitat use of sea turtles in areas that the Navy conducts underwater detonations? And the answer was 15 turtles have been outfitted with the satellite tags inside and out of Apra Harbor. 13 of the tags have completed their data transmission period. From the spatial analysis of the GPS locations and movements from these satellite tags, we've not seen direct overlap of the turtles with the Agate Bay Mine Neutralization Site, PD Point Mine Neutralization Site, and Outer Apra Harbor Underwater Detonation Site. However, turtles are spending significant amounts of time in and moving through areas within 1 to 2 kilometers of these sites, and the lack of overlapping GPS points could be due to the relatively low frequency of GPS locations obtained from these tags. Analysis and filtering of Argos location classes, see supplemental materials, may provide more data on daily locations. So, yeah, I was also looking to see reports on the training exercises, like how often they occurred and in which locations, and some of these reports, for example, the number of active sonar hours or amount of explosives and information regarding these exercises are not included. And sometimes they're listed as classified, and so we just see asterisks, like you see the activity in asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. So there's not much data really for us to see there. But for the turtles, I admit there is data from the GPS, and so hopefully that, yeah, everyone can have access to that. Another question was, yes, okay, so the permits, this is why I was looking through it. So the permit that was for 5 years authorized an average of 12,580 detonations of various magnitudes per year for 5 years, and 81,962 takings of 26 different marine mammal species per year for 5 years. But I couldn't find a number of takings exactly in the report. Is there, I mean, maybe I just didn't read it right. Is there a report on that, the number of takings that since 2015, I guess?
We don't have a direct way to quantify the take. So what we do track is the amount of hours that were authorized and making sure that we're staying within the amount of sonar hours or the amount of explosives that were authorized. So that's what's reported to National Marine Fisheries Service. And yeah, we acknowledge that a lot of those data are classified, and so they're provided to National Marine Fisheries Service, and they have the clearance to review that material. But we do track. That's how we quantify essentially the take.
The time.
Is by the amount of hours that are authorized and making sure we don't exceed those.
By the way, I
hours or
noticed
activities.
in page 9 when you describe the take, you just described taking as a harassment. But is that different than NOAA's definition, which defines taking to include, you know, killing and much more activity than harassment?
Yeah, so take can include everything from harassment to mortality. So what we do in our analysis, and we haven't started the analysis for this document, but for the 2015 document, we provide them with our estimate of what the takes will be. And in the letter of authorization you're referring to, they're split out by level B, which is harassment,
Right.
or level A, which is injury. And we have the majority, 90-something% of them are level B, which is behavioral harassment. Level A, we did have some anticipated injury or some modeled injury. We really don't anticipate injury, but we did have some level A, and then we had no mortalities.
All right.
So in this case, we use again, as John said, they're a cooperating agency, so we use the same definitions under MMPA and ESA in our consultations. And then it goes through the modeling process, and then they give us the authorization.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I've been using that definition, but in this document, it doesn't say all those things. Okay, just wanted to make sure. And then in this report, again, there's only one reported annual exercise report for the MITT period, August 2015 to August 2016. And it says that no major training exercises have been conducted. Does that mean that the training exercises we've been hearing of, like the joint exercises, those are, I don't know, not reported because I'm not sure. Why are those not included in these reports? Or were they not?
The requirement is to keep track and report on major training exercises.
So would those not
the
major?
other ones are not reported because they're not considered major training exercises.
Okay.
Right, and it's a similar, everywhere else we train, like Southern California, Hawaii, the major training exercises are, it's a term for under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, under that authorization, those activities that have a number of ships, a large amount of sonar that may be planned. And even in Southern California, there's training going on every day, the authorization asks, provides us a specific, and we do report the cumulative hours of sonar, the amount of sonar and types of sonar that he used, that it provides NIMS in a classified annex, because it could suggest levels of readiness that we can't broadcast out of in an unclassified sense. But even in Southern California, where there's training every day, what actually makes it into the exercise report are those major training events like a COM2X, like the Rim of the Pacific in Hawaii. So we don't inventory and categorize everything for the permit, but they do want to see these major events categorized.
All right. Has Guam had any major events since this reporting period?
The major event for the Mariana region is an event such as a Valiant Shield, which happened fall of 2016. Okay. So the other events just don't have the level of sonar activity or activity associated with them to reach that trigger of being called a major training event for permitting purposes.
All right. Okay, and then is there any point where the public could comment on the Marine Fisheries Services input, or like where we could comment on their permitting process or their findings?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, absolutely. And even though we have our Environmental Policy Act schedule, which has a report on our draft, and our final EIS, the ability to comment, their rulemaking process to issue that final rule, which then gives us our letter of authorization, they will also have a proposed rule, which then reiterates everything that we have in the EIS, and then some, and then more things specific to their regulatory requirements. But the public does get an opportunity to comment on the proposed rule, and then we work with NIMS to reconcile comments and making sure that our answers are well thought out between both parties. But the public gets, with us in our Environmental Policy Act procedures, 3 opportunities to comment. Then they get an additional opportunity to comment on the very same analysis with the specificity of looking at Marine Mammal Protection Act under that proposed rule when that's released, as we did in 2015 and as we did in 2010.
Okay. Proposed rule meaning, is that the proposed rule, does that mean the proposed permit? I mean, is that a similar data we're looking at?
It's a rule-making. You go ahead and take it, Julie. You know that better than I do.
Yeah, I know the regulatory definitions, but yes, there's a proposed rule which goes out in the Federal Register that talks about our action, that talks about what they're planning to authorize, what the mitigations will be. Then there's the final rule, and what we call the permit is essentially the letter of authorization. Okay. So that really drills down and gives us the exact numbers for the authorization. But the proposed rule and the final rule go into a lot more of their analysis. And as John said, the proposed rule is the time for the public to comment in the Federal Register.
Is there any requirement to monitor coral outside of FDM? You said you're monitoring the coral around FDM, but what about other places? Is that also part of this monitoring?
We don't. The only requirement for the ESA-listed corals is around FDM from the National Marine Fisheries Service. We do also do a consultation under Magnuson-Stevens, which is for essential fish habitat, and we work through that consultation process also with National Marine Fisheries Service. And in that case, in the last document, John referred to sometimes at the very, very end of things, we'll make a change in the FEIS or in the ROD. In that case, our EFH consultation resulted in reducing the amount of pounds of explosives we were going to use, for example, in Apra Harbor. So we worked with them on it. They said, hey, right now you're asking for 20-pound charges. Can we reduce that to 10? And we acknowledged that we could at that point. So there's a consultation process, and there's kind of a discussion there. A lot of the coral monitoring and research is done by Joint Region Marianas under the INRMP, the Integrated Natural Resources Program. And so that feeds any of the analysis that we do. But National Marine Fisheries felt like in this instance, the only place that both agencies felt like we would have a direct impact to coral might be FDM. And so that's where we're required to continue the surveys.
All right, on that. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for being here and for your answers. And looking forward to continued public notice and comment on every available opportunity that they might have. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Vice Speaker Talai, Senator Esteves, thank you for joining us this morning. Do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the information you've provided. I will at this time, though, reserve comments until I see the draft EIS, which I'm assuming would get forwarded to us. And again, as the Vice Speaker reiterated, I look forward to additional public input in this, and honestly, just continued support from JRM with regards to the concerns from the locals here into the impact. Understanding Guam's unique both geography and ecology, and not just how it affects now, but how it affects future growth for not just Guam, but the Marianas as a whole. Also, I request that as you go
up to the northern islands as you go up to Saipan and Rota and Tinian and get their comments, that be provided to this body as well, because I think it does play a factor. I think considering we're generally one people in how we make our decisions here and how we input into the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Esteves. Just to follow up on that request, when individuals submit position papers or responses to this scoping, and you prepare the draft SEIS and OEIS, are those comments visible or readily available to the public?
Yes, all the comments received at any stage are part of the official admin record. During the scoping period, the comments we receive, we typically, rather than dealing with each comment individually, we deal with them thematically. Like there is a number of comments received saying that we have a no training, no action alternative. There was a number of comments received saying that we don't train or do something different. So in this phase, when you see the draft document, the draft EIS, it'll have a scoping report that provides those overall themes that we heard. Fishing access is always number one, and when we anticipated that, that's why Monday we went to see the fishermen. When the draft EIS comes out, then we get letters, then part of that draft EIS will have a chapter that has public, in the final EIS, we'll have a chapter that has all of the letters, an inventory of those substantive comments that we received. And again, we'll try to block them together when many people say the same type of thing. We'll block them together and have an answer that's responsive to that block of comments. But you'll see even greater detail in that final EIS for the comments received on the actual analysis.
Okay, thank you. Madam Vice Speaker, another question?
One more question is there any part of this process that requires the governor's signature or the government of Guam to issue a permit or any other action by the government of Guam?
There's no permits that are required, but we do, when appropriate and as appropriate, go to the Office of Planning under the Coastal Zone Management Act. That's the one place that comes to mind right offhand where we deal directly with and consult directly with the your planning offices as well as the offices up in the CNMI. So under the CZMA, Coastal Zone Management Act, there is we seek the concurrence on determinations from your appropriate offices.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, Senators, for joining us. Mr. Susui, thank you. And I certainly hope that you have an appreciation of the process that we are using and applying today, because I believe that any activities moving forward is going to be essential to at least involve the community and allow them access and visual sight of exactly what the nature of these conversations are, especially as it applies to the military buildup. So thank you very much, Mr. Susui, Mr. Salas, Mr. Van Dam, Ms. Rivers. I apologize, I said Rivera, but Ms. Rivers, and to your JAG, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the discussion on the informational hearing, and we will follow it up when the draft SEIS is complete. Thank you very much again. Have a good day.
And thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and good to see you again, sir.